I have a couple jokes for you today. It's appropriate for this time of the season. A little boy needed $100 really badly, and so he prayed for 2 weeks, and that didn't work. He didn't get his $100, and so he decided he was going to write God a letter and asking for the $100. So he sent the letter, and when it got to the postal authorities, they thought that was so cute, and they didn't know what to do with it. They decided to send it to President Obama. And so they sent it to the White House, and President Obama said, "Oh, this is really nice. Let's put $5 in an envelope with a little note and send it back to the boy." So the boy gets the envelope, and he gets the mail, and he sees it's $5, and he's glad. But he decides he's going to send God a little thank you note, and he says, "Thank you very much for sending the money. However, I noticed that for some reason you had to send it through Washington, D.C. As usual, these politicians took $95 in taxes." I thought since it was tax season, we could just bring that up. Linus was talking to Charlie Brown, and Linus says, "I guess it's wrong always to worry about tomorrow. Maybe we should just worry about today." And Charlie Brown said, "No, that's just giving up. I'm still hoping for yesterday being better." I was thinking about the disciples. I'm sure that's what they were thinking too. They were hoping for yesterday to be better. And it's been a hard week for them, and we've gone through that already. And they went through the Palm Sunday, and that was great. And they went through Maundy Thursday, the upper room, ate with Jesus. But there was this forbearing burden on them. And then the arrest of Jesus, and Jesus being crucified. And then the tomb being empty. And so we find the disciples today hiding behind locked doors in a room with fear and doubt and all those things that we would know, that we would go through. Anxiety and confusion, not knowing, and that's not comfortable. And they're not sure what's going to happen to them because, as Ron was saying, the authorities, the Jewish authorities, even the Roman authorities, can't think this is very good. Who has stolen Jesus' body? And they're not sure either, because the scripture doesn't ever say. They come to the tomb, they see it's open, and Jesus is gone, but they're still not sure. We get that. And Mary even says she sees him. That's an idle tale. They think it's an idle tale. And that's just a synopsis of all Gospels, because they all have different versions. So there's understanding. It's understandable for them to have doubt, because we get that, right? In our humanness, we like to see things too, as Ron showed us in the children's message. But this is the biggest sign act. John calls miracles signs, pointing to God. And this is the biggest one. And so it's exciting and fearful at the same time. It's not unusual for us to face fear and doubt. Have you all had fear in the midst of issues and doubt that God's presence is there, or God's provision, or God's faithfulness? See, for the disciples, this is real to them. This is a real event. We have real events too. Events that scare us, that takes our breath away, that leaves us in despair because we're not sure of God's presence or faithfulness. We get a crisis in faith sometimes. We might have doubt and fear if we get laid off, and it's been a while since we could find a job. Will God provide for us? And we might have doubt and fear if we've made wrong choices and went the wrong way of what God wanted for us. And we might have doubt and fear that God would ever be faithful to love us into the fold again. We might not know. We might not believe. There might be great doubts. And we might have despair and long-time illnesses that we have or our loved ones have. The disciples were grieving. There's all these emotions floating around in the room you can imagine. Doubt and fear, anxiety, despair, you name it, they had it. You know, a couple years ago, Marilee and Walter, they're so kind to give me the Elkhart Truth, and I get to read it, and we recycle it that way. And I remember a couple years ago, there was an article in there about faith of pastors. And I wish I tried to put my hands on that article through the archives, but it said, this huge percentage of pastors did not believe in God or just weren't sure. A huge percentage very much floored me. And so maybe they've seen so many things in their lives that they just couldn't believe, so much hardship and so much depression, despondency in people's lives. And they might have had a crisis of faith. That's what we could say. It reminds me of this movie, and it's an odd movie, and I tried to get clips, I couldn't, but it was called Signs with Mel Gibson. Is anybody familiar with it? It's a sci-fi movie. And I'm not a sci-fi lover, but there's some great messages in this movie. Mel Gibson's wife dies. And before she dies, she's in this tragic car accident. And the sheriff calls him. And the sheriff says, you need to come because your wife's still alive. But as soon as we move these cars, she's going to die. And she's there in this scene, and she's crushed between two cars. And she's talking. It's the most sad thing. And she's talking, and she's giving these words of encouragement to her husband, who is Graham Hess. But these words of encouragement, we'll soon find out in the movie, are prophetic words of something that Graham Hess has to battle. That the words come to him, and he's able to. But during this time, what happens is she dies, of course. And he's an Episcopal priest, and he decides that he's leaving the priesthood because he's starting to have a crisis of faith. And he doesn't say anything. He just decides to leave because he just needs some time. You understand that, right? You have grieving in your life, and there's some tragedy, and you need some time. And so Graham Hess leaves the priesthood in the Episcopal Church. But he's suffering so much grief and despair, and he's doubting God's existence. But he doesn't tell anyone. And so what happens in the movie, and this is where the sci-fi, there's these are signs all over the world, and people, think they're miracles, and all these things are happening, but it's really aliens. These are like, typical alien, they're green, skinny aliens, slimy looking. But during this time is where his tension is really revealed. No one knows that he's losing his faith. He's never revealed it to his family. And things begin to happen. And as the tension builds, he has this conversation with his brother who lives there with him and his two children, a boy and a girl. And he starts to have these conversations with them because it's getting tense. And in tense times, things come out. And his brother, his name is Merrill, and he's a minor league baseball player. And his brother starts to talk about miracles and signs and how they can believe in God during this time. And no, Graham Hess, who's Mel Gibson, says, no, there is no one for us to trust in except for ourselves. And the brother is just floored. And they have this conversation at the dinner table, and it's really in this tense time, and they know it's aliens. And the little girl says, maybe we should say a prayer. Graham Hess says, no. Well, why not, she says. We're not saying a prayer. Bo, who's her brother, she says, Bo has a bad feeling. He goes, yes, I had a bad dream. I had a dream. We aren't saying a prayer. Eat, he says. The little girl says, I hate you. That's fine, he says. You let Mom die. I am not wasting one more minute of my life on prayer, not one more minute. Understood. A faith in crises. This is where he reveals to his family that he no longer believes there's a God because he can't see. He can't see that there's a God. We get that, don't we? I just had that. Not that I was a crisis in faith, but I just saw something forever and ever and ever. But then, in this movie, there's this pivotal scene. And the alien is in the house. And it's quirky, but the message is so good. It's so powerful. And the alien is so angry because this Graham Hess had cut off his finger, so he was out for revenge. And this little boy had had an asthma attack, and this alien shoots some kind of stuff in there to knock the boy out. And he picks up the boy, and he starts to run with him. And all of a sudden, the wife's prophetic words come to light. And everything she had said was happening in that moment. And all those words that were encouraging became words of wisdom and words of direction, what to do. And of course, these are always good news things at the end, right? Because it's not always the way for us. It's not always how we want it. But this is pivotal. Because Graham Hess realizes his whole life has come to this culmination, that he comes to realize that everything that he has been through is right in this pivotal moment. And they defeat the alien, of course, and they carry the boy. He picks up the boy, Graham Hess picks up his son and carries him outside, and he lays him in the yard, and he pleads to a God that he didn't really believe in. Don't let this happen. And you can imagine how you would plead in that time. And of course, the son wakes up. And then in the movie, just at the end, it shows him he's restored to God. He's wearing his clerical collar, and he decides to go back into the priesthood. It doesn't always work that way for us. The good news like that, the happy endings. But the message is that God never leaves us in that place of despair. God enters into those places where we have doubts and we have fears and we have anxiety. God would not let Graham Hess, God would not let the disciples stay in that locked room. That Graham Hess was locked inside of his own emotions that he could not reveal. Jesus enters in the midst of our fear and doubt like he does today in the scripture passage. And he speaks a word of peace into those places because they don't always have happy endings. But we serve a God that's a God of comfort and a God of faithfulness with promises that we can count on. This painting by Caravaggio, I hope you can see it. It's kind of dark. But I want you to look at Jesus' face. Jesus has this face. I want you to understand. Look at Jesus' face. Caravaggio captures the essence of who Jesus is in this moment. I want to show you who I am. I want you to believe who I am. Put your finger right in there. And he has this wonderful compassion, this wonderful caring place, patience and kindness and understanding. So beautiful. God doesn't leave us in those places of doubt and fear and despair. God moves in the midst of our fears and doubts, in our doubts, that he's there in our grieving, in our illnesses, the fear of what's in our future, and it changes us. And he doesn't condemn us for doubting or fearing or not sure, unsure spirit. He doesn't condemn. He offers us compassion and caring. He offers himself to us in peace, in presence of comfort and truth. No questions asked. And it's okay. It's okay for us to doubt. And it's okay for us to be afraid and to question. Jesus was afraid. Take this cup from me, not my will, but yours. My God, why have you forsaken me? He gets it. Jesus was afraid, anxious. We are afraid and anxious. And in the midst, God's grace increases. God's grace gets huge inside that we understand it better. God gives us room to wrestle with those things. Gives us room to seek understanding and truth. Breathes a word of peace. Jesus never condemns us for those things. It's important for us to know that. It's important for us to know that it's okay. It's okay for us to be human. Marks of faith. Jesus has marks of faith in his hands and his feet, in his side. Those are his sufferings. And our doubts and our fears and those things for us, our anxieties, they become our marks of faith. We can struggle, and it's okay. And what happens is our faith no longer becomes a wishy-washy faith. We are strong. Our faith becomes stronger. We don't need creeds to tell us. We don't need to be spoon-fed information because we're not afraid to doubt. We're not afraid to have anxiety or fear. We aren't afraid because we know God is going to enter in and God illumines us. God helps us believe. Marks of faith. Jesus says, see my side and my hands and my feet. And we say to others, look what I've been through. Look how God has entered in. Those are our marks of faith. Those are the things that we can show other people. Marks of faith. What happens is we grow deeper, more stronger in God. Thomas proclaims, my Lord and my God. There's a deepness about that when we have those not sure times and a little afraid and in despair. Show me, God. Show me. I need some evidence. I need some help here. Jesus shows them the marks. Jesus shows us. And then we show others. I'm going to leave you with this because I can't not talk about. What happens is when we start sharing our doubts and fears and the things that we're going through and how God is helping us or looking for help among the body of believers, we become this great unified body. We're not afraid. We have a hard time doing that. In the movie, the brother, he realizes, there's a revelation that he sees that his brother has lost his faith. And he says to him, there are a lot of things I can take, and some things I can't. But what I can't take is when my older brother, who's everything that I want to be, starts losing faith in things. I saw that look in your eyes last night, and I don't ever want to see that look in your eyes again. It's hard for us to tell people that we doubt that God's in our life, isn't it? It's hard to tell people that we fear because we're not supposed to, right? We're Christians. We're supposed to be always stellar in our faith. People will look at us like, maybe you're weak in the faith. We thought you were stronger. You need to trust. I mean, that's what Jesus comes and shows us today. Here's my marks of faith. And we come to show other people we have marks of faith too. And it's all part of our faith journey. Without the risk of disappointing somebody, without the risk of shame or guilt, what happens is our church becomes authentic and real. There's something real in being able to tell people how you really feel. There's something really authentic and honest. And our church becomes a church with the marks of faith. That people come in and they say, this is real to me. I have the same questions. I feel the same. I'm not separated from them because they're authentic and they're honest and they're real. That's who Thomas was. Hey, they all doubted, but we called Thomas the doubting Thomas. We know that because he wasn't afraid to say. And it builds the body of Christ. We could be known for that, our marks of faith. Psalm 133 says, unity in the church is like the precious oil on the head, running down upon the beard, on the beard of Aaron, running down over the collar of his robes. It is like the dew of Hermon, which falls on the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord ordained his blessing, life forevermore. It's so rich. The unity in the church, it's so authentic and sweet. We can be known for our marks of faith. It's nothing wrong with doubting and having some fears and anxieties. It draws us into God. It draws us so deep. And it's part of our marks of faith. It's in our faith journey. It's who we are. It's rich. And at the time you're going through it, you feel lost. But Jesus never leaves us in despair. That's a powerful message and comes and comforts us. Even when we do not see, we believe.